Can you tell me, when you say that they might have been sleeping, were they found in beds?
Yes.
Hey guys, so do you think all of them were found in bed? Do you think that that is an absolute statement from the coroner? Do you think that that statement is actually correct, that all 4 victims were found in beds? What do you guys think about that? So we are going to come back to this. We are going to deal with that particular aspect, but we're going to kind of just sort of drill down into some of the details. Which door was the door that was entered and left through? Was it the front door? Was it the sliding door? And we're going to kind of try and get a bit closer to the psychology of the killer who's still out there, kind of, on the loose, right? So I have put in the sort of like in a poll, kind of, on the loose. Who do you think was the primary victim? I kind of actually mean by that the primary target. I tend to agree with you guys that it's not Ethan. I see about 12% of you voted for him. I tend to agree that it's not him. I also feel that it's unlikely to be Xana Kernodle. I guess it's possible, but also a lower proportion of you have voted for her. It seems to be between Kaylee and Maddie, doesn't it? And at the moment, Madison Mogan is, according to you guys, the primary target, the primary victim right now. I would just say right now, I'm also leaning that way. I also think that Maddie Mogan was the primary target. I think it's also possible it could be Kaylee. I'll go into that, why I think that, not in this particular episode, in this particular analysis. I think you've got to start off by kind of asking the question, when the killer walked by this house, or when the house was brought up in conversation, or if it was seen in photos, what would that particular person think? Well, isn't the answer that he would think about four blonde, it's 4 blonde women, a brunette, and then 1 guy in this house. But basically a woman, a home, a student house with, in the language of the students there, 5, I don't want to say numbers, but sort of hot girls live there kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like a house that is basically an all-girl place where girls are staying, and there's 1 guy staying there, and almost a perception of, wow, isn't he lucky? Isn't that guy lucky to be surrounded by hot girls kind of thing? And then doesn't that start eating at you, right? And I don't really mean this from the perspective of someone who's in their 30s or 40s or 50s, because you might not really think that way. I'm talking about the perception of someone who has come out of school and is now at university, and is kind of comparing himself to other people, trying to find his place in the world, only to find that he's not finding it, that is not as potent and attractive as it maybe he wants to be or wishes to be. Okay, so before we get going, let's have a look at who's here. Terry Dean, good to see you. SW Firefly, Helena, One Feline. One Feline says he didn't live there while he was staying there. I've actually seen some media reports saying that he was living there. But I mean, the point is that he had access better than anyone else, certainly at that time, of men. He had access. I suppose you can make the point, right? So I just want to deal with this. So you can, I suppose you could say, a guy didn't live there, so you know what, there's absolutely no reason why someone would feel any sense of jealousy, right? So in other words, although there was a guy in that house, you know, somebody else who was also a guy wouldn't really bother him. It wouldn't really affect all of this at all. So then, if that's your argument, then what did cause this person to do this? So in other words, if you say it's got nothing to do with a guy being jealous or a guy not liking what another guy's doing, or that guy's got something and I don't have it. So if that's your argument, then what is your argument, right? Sherry Parr, good to see you. Dave, when I was in college, sleeping until noon wasn't unusual. Yeah, for some of us, it's even beyond college. Ginger Snap, Judy, good to see you. Bobby Hazard, Kaylee, supposedly, yeah, that's, I haven't seen that. Until I do see that, I'm not really going to be weighing in on that. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about what is known and certainly what I know about, and just providing a little bit of the classic true crime rocket science analysis, right? So, according to the father, I think his name's Jeffrey, of, let's bring this up. So just let's have a look at the victims. Ethan Chapin, 20 years old, all of them either 20 or 21. That's actually his girlfriend over there, Xana Canodal. She was the only brunette in the house. There are also two blondes that live there. They've been identified. At this point, I don't really want to show their pictures. I'm sure that a lot of people want to talk to them. I don't really want to add to that, although it's important. I think that they have been traumatized. I think that they uh, need to be with their families and maybe talk to law enforcement. I'm sure that they are going to be targeted now by YouTube channels. And I must say, if you know them, if you're someone who's watching this and you know them, I would highly recommend that they do not talk to YouTube channels, because in the Kylie Rodney case, someone who did that became an automatic suspect. What YouTubers will do is they're looking for content, and anyone that they can talk to, they will then pull that to pieces and try and opportunistically use that. So please, guys, if you're friends of any of the survivors, uh, take my advice. Advise them not to talk to YouTubers. They can talk to the law enforcement, they can talk to therapists, they can talk to their family. At worst, talk to the media, but please do not talk to YouTubers. Take my advice. You'll be sorry you did, because YouTubers are going to try and milk this as much as they can, and they're going to become suspects, right? There's already a little bit of suspicion around that. They're going to jump on that. So please take my advice. If you're from that university and you're friends with them, you guys need to all get together and not participate in social media, especially at this time. Okay. Take it from me. Take it from me. People in chat, I'm sure you guys can reinforce what I'm saying. Joan White says such good advice. James Houghton says well said, good point. You must really be not just be careful of the YouTubers you pay attention to now, but please do not actually do an interview with them, because you will become a suspect and other YouTubers will jump on that as well, right? Stay away from social media. Talk to your family, talk to your friends directly. Set your accounts to private, all that kind of thing, right? Protect yourself, basically. So what I'm going to be doing here is dealing with what is known in the mainstream already, but then also taking a little bit further, right? Okay, so Kaylee Consalves, 21 years old. She and Madison Mogan, I think, grew up together. On their Instagram, you can actually see that they knew each other since they were quite young kids. So, and they were both seen at that food stall So we've got footage of them within possibly an hour of, the end of their lives. But all four of them lived in the same rented house. And then they had two other roommates as well. We don't really know what their movements were. And also we assume one of those girls called 911, right? Okay. Now, my opinion is that Madison Mogen was the target. At this point, I don't want to say why, but I would, for my own reasons, I believe Madison Mogen was the primary target, possibly Kaylee Consalves, but I don't think either Xana or Ethan were the primary target. I think they were sort of collateral targets in a sense. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying at the moment. Most of you are also saying Madison Mogen, and the least of you are saying Ethan Chapin, which I definitely do agree with. Okay. Jody says, why do you say that? I'm not going to say why at this point. So according to her father, 20-year-old Xana Conodal was a fighter. I wouldn't be surprised if all four of those kids were fighters, and that all of them would have fought for their lives if they were endangered. Most people would. But through inference, what this may indicate is that Xana wasn't the first victim. That's Xana over there. She may instead have been one of the last of the four victims, if not the last. So according to Jeffrey Conodal, that is Xana's father, he said the following. He said the last that he heard from his daughter was just before the attack. In fact, I think it was close to midnight. So the 12th, Saturday night, the 12th of November, he heard from her, and I think that they spoke. He says he heard from her. I don't know whether that means a text or whether they spoke. He said that she seemed fine. She didn't express any unhappiness. I've got to say that this reminds me again of the Amanda Knox case, where Meredith Kircher also spoke to her mother. And, to what extent had Meredith expressed concerns, complaints to her family just before she died? It's quite important to look at things like that. Emails, texts to family members saying, Mom, I'm quite upset about this. This person's arguing with me, this person's upset with me, whatever. Some of that correspondence can be really important and helpful. Is there anything like that in this story? He also said something that was really interesting, and I want to bring up this image. That's the sliding door. So Jeffrey Conodal, the father of Xana, said that he thought that the killer would have entered from this entrance, not from the front door, that he would have gone around the back to find the sliding door, and possibly the sliding door, I don't think it was open. I think it was just unlocked, but who knows, maybe it was open. And then another friend said that a lot of people actually had the code to that front door. So it's possible that the front door was accessed, in other words, entered through the front door, and the sliding door was how they left. And ironically, I think that's almost there's a similarity to that in the Madeleine McCann case, where I believe someone entered the sliding door, which is open, and left through the other door, the wooden door by the car park. That's what I believe happened. In this case, it could be front door, enter, exit through this door, but I think it's maybe even more likely that they entered and exited through this door. The reason why I don't think the killer entered through the front door is just because it was so easy to see from miles away. It was easy to see someone entering. because you had the big driveway out the front. Someone driving by could see that as well. So you'd probably want to enter unseen. Does that make sense? Yeah, there would be blood everywhere, but there would also be prints. So now they want to, I think, need to establish where's the blood trail? Is it coming out the front door? Is it coming out one of the side doors? Is it coming out there? And would it make sense that the killer would exit here and try and stay sort of under the trees, because there are trees surrounding this property? Or would he go to the road? Did he arrive by car or did he arrive on foot? Did he live nearby? Okay. Another thing that is quite interesting is, can you see there are lights over here? And there are lights over there. And, you know, just in preparing for this live stream, I've sort of noticed a few little things that are obvious, but you don't really notice them. One of them is what is right behind me, the Christmas wreath. So in other words, it's approaching Christmas. And you could also have a situation of, okay, the semester's over, I'm going to go home for the holidays, I'm going to go home for Christmas. Well, are you going to spend Christmas with me? No, I'm not. No, our relationship's over. Where are you going to be for Christmas? Are you going to be with that person or with me or somewhere else or with your family? No, I'm going to be over there. That's also going to be indicating possibly the end of a relationship or the status of something. And so especially this idea of Christmas, if you come back to this image here, can you see those lights that are on? One wonders whether those lights weren't on day and night. And why that's quite important is to ask, if the killer entered when everyone was asleep, you would imagine it was dark inside the house, but if these lights were on, it could provide some illumination. So in other words, the killer doesn't need to turn on a light, doesn't need to bring a flashlight, doesn't need to do the crime in the day so you can see. You can anticipate that there's a certain amount of natural lighting from the Christmas lights, right? Does that make sense? So if he doesn't turn, if he's entering a house in the dark, how's he going to navigate? Well, the answer is that weren't there some lights anyway? And didn't he know that? Okay. I did look at the moon phase because I hadn't seen these lights at that time. So we are going to look at the moon phase as well. Okay, so let's continue. It's also emerged that some of the victims were stabbed in their beds. Now I'm seeing some reports saying, so like that, see that some of the murdered victims were stabbed in their beds, right? And then you have other headlines saying 4 students were stabbed to death in their beds, right? So there's already a discrepancy. Were some murdered in their beds, or were all of them? If it was a personal attack, who was it on? Who was the target of that attack? So that is why I played this clip from the coroner, that's her there. And she was asked the question, were they found in their beds? And she answered simply with the word yes, right? Now, my personal opinion is that this is accurate. So you might say, wow, is the coroner wrong? I don't think she's wrong. I think the way the question was asked is, were they found in their beds? And when she answers yes, she doesn't mean, it's not were all of them found in their beds, it's were they. It's a little bit of a unclear question. I think it makes sense that some were found in their beds, and I think it makes sense that some weren't, and we're going to kind of go to that. That's a good question. Where did the survivors go that night, if anywhere? We don't know, but what we do know is actually, we don't know this either, but what I think we assume is that they arrived home earlier and I guess were asleep before the others. We don't know that for a fact. Yeah, so Koi Cat says to not be invited to Thanksgiving is a big deal and it's closer to the date. Absolutely. Yeah, that did come from the coroner. Funny enough, People magazine spelled it Corner. I don't know if they still haven't corrected it. Okay, so if you let's take this away, right? So let's forget that it's some students, and let's actually assume that that is actually accurate. Let's assume that it is all 4 students killed in their beds, right? If you just take that idea, killing someone in their bed means that you are literally going into a dwelling, the killer going into the dwelling, going all the way through all the other rooms, the kitchen, the lounge, possibly upstairs, to the private space where someone is. Perhaps you've even got to open the door. And that person is completely harmless. They're not talking to you. They're not arguing with you. And isn't that why it's a targeted killing? Because it's not as though someone confronted you, said something nasty to you, threw something at you. They did something in the past, maybe even didn't do something in the past, didn't respond to your overtures, didn't show the right amount of interest in you, whatever it was, insulted you in some way. And you are so upset by this that that is lingering so much in your heart, in your mind, kind of in your organism, that you literally hunt them down where they are in their beds and kill them there, right? And then, of course, you have someone who may be a witness to that, perhaps in the same bedroom. I know when I lived in England, I shared like a digs with somebody else. We were a house with, I think, 10, 12 people in it. And, me and another guy slept in the same room. Often when you are trying to save money, you don't have your own room. And I would presume that I'm not really sure if they would have had their own rooms. Who knows? It was quite a big house, though, on the other hand. But the point being, you can see how it's a targeted attack if you're going all the way into someone's bedroom and they're asleep, right? Also, this idea if someone is asleep, well, don't you know that they're asleep? Don't you see that the lights went off? Don't you even wait for the lights to go off? Don't you also know what those movements are, right? All of that sort of comes up. 6-bedroom house. Okay, that's interesting. So 6-bedroom house, surely someone was sleeping in the same bed as someone else in that situation. Maybe, maybe not. Someone else has 3-bedroom, 3-bath. That then also raised the question, if someone was in a separate bedroom, why would you go into another bedroom and kill that person as well? Or did that not happen? Did that other person come from their bedroom, right? Jen says, I don't buy the other girls didn't hear anything, look closer. I don't either. I don't believe that nobody heard anything. But I also think it's possible that certainly the first victim didn't hear anything, right? Okay. Crypto Zoo says, I always sleep with a sleep sound on so I cannot hear my neighbors. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So that's something I didn't know. I didn't know it was a 6-bedroom house, but it's certainly big enough. So that's from that perspective. If you acknowledge that some were murdered in their beds, then I think that shows probably the first victims were in the beds, right? Not necessarily, you could have someone passed out, but by inference, if the first victim was in bed, then that's the primary target. And the victims who weren't in bed were the ones who got in the way on the way out, or heard something and inquired and were collateral damage, right? Collateral casualties. Okay. So just my opinion, I think the students in bed are more likely to be the primary victims, and this reinforces the idea that the front door was locked. Why would you be in bed on a cold winter's night with the front door open? So just think about that. If they were in bed, would the door be open? Now, again, I've kind of got to wonder. I think I saw it somewhere where they said the front door was open. Does that mean the front door, the door you see behind me? And does open mean it was literally open? Or does it mean, sorry, does it mean it was unlocked? Also, it's possible that someone opened the door but didn't actually exit through that door. And I can't help I'm sorry to say this, but I can't help thinking there are a couple of cases where there wasn't an intruder. So I'm thinking about, well, let's not say that. Let me put it a different way. There's some cases where I doubt whether there was an intruder, and yet doors were left open, and in another case, there was a broken window to infer the idea of an intruder, right? And I couldn't help thinking about that. Did someone open a door in order to make you think someone came and exited that door? But if you take that thinking further and you say, well, did one of the other housemates commit this crime? I just can't imagine a young 20-something-year-old woman carrying around a knife like the knife that we've seen. Not only that, I just can't imagine a woman killing 4 people in one go, including a male. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's totally out of the realm of possibility. I'm just saying it just seems extremely unlikely. That's all. Agatha Misty says, earbuds, alcohol, sleeping pills, lots of reasons to sleep through it. So, Agatha, you're welcome to, what's the word? You're welcome to sort of deal with a scenario where you say, you know what, I think everyone just slept through everything and it was just really open and shut. Everyone had earbuds in and couldn't hear anything, and it was easy as pie for the killer to come in and leave. And nobody noticed anything, and that's how it was. What I'm about to show you is that that's likely not the case, right? Did 4 out of 4 people have earbuds in? I do think alcohol can definitely play a factor in that you're sleeping deeper than you normally would. The other thing is, I don't think they were asleep long enough to go into REM sleep, that very, very deep sleep. I think at most they were asleep around about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I don't think they were asleep long enough to go into that sort of phase. But maybe those staying upstairs were in that phase at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We don't quite know what they were doing. Okay, let me continue. So let's address this question sort of more fully and completely. Were they all in bed and were they all sleeping? What do you guys think is the answer there? All in bed, all sleeping. So it's both. Do you think they were all in bed, all sleeping? Let's see what you guys say. Look at the poll at the moment. Yeah, it's kind of sticking to the same thing, although it's quite close. Almost a third of you saying Xana Kernodle was a primary victim. Just a few more saying Kaylee Gonsalves, and then most of you at the moment saying Maddie Mogan. Less than 10% saying Ethan Shapen. I must say, I tend to agree with those stats at the moment. I also think Maddie Mogan is the likely primary victim. So yeah, so Nella says I agree both. Vicky says all in bed sleeping. Okay. So I'm going to try and demonstrate why that's not the case. First of all, that they weren't all in bed and that they weren't all sleeping. Okay. So see if you follow me in terms of this reasoning. So when Ashley Banfield asked the coroner, were they found in bed? She didn't say, were they all found in bed? She said, were they found in beds? The coroner responded, yes. I feel the question and the answer deserve clarification. More likely, in my opinion, some were found in beds. That's my opinion. I agree with this headline, and I'm going to explain why. It wouldn't surprise me if some were found in their beds. That's my personal opinion. Were they all found in beds? That's not what Banfield specifically asked, but I would wager the answer is that they weren't. I've also heard an unconfirmed report that the reason the victims were described as unconscious, so when the person made the 911 call, we still don't know who actually made that 911 call. But when that call was made, the victim was described as unconscious. I think that was because, or I've heard an unconfirmed report that was because when the other housemates tried to open the door, they couldn't because someone was actually lying against the door. So somebody lying against the door means that person's not in bed. If you were stabbed in bed, you could also make the argument you could be stabbed in bed and then you try and get out of bed. You could make that argument. The blood in this image seems to indicate at least one victim who was on the floor. Again, we're dealing with inferences here because a bed would tend to soak up blood like a sponge. Now, you might say, no, that's not true. You could have the bed soaking up some of the blood and some, but not so much that it would come out like this, right? In my opinion. So I would imagine that this person is probably lying on the floor somewhere, and you actually saw some video footage of through the window of some of the crime scene techs. Timmy, I'm going to put you down. That seem to be taking photos on the ground. This is through the window. Again, there's not too much that you can draw out of that little bit of information. But given the time of night, as early as 3 a.m. or even 4 a.m., that this crime is supposed to have occurred, it suggests that they had settled down and gone to sleep, right? I do agree that probably all of them were in bed and asleep, or in bed at least, with the lights out when this crime was attempted. I agree with that. I think that the killer probably was outside and noted that the lights were out when he made his move. I definitely agree with that. It also indicates that the killer himself likely chose or preferred this time. So he chose the time of whatever, 3:30, because he wasn't sleeping or sleepy, because he's a night owl as well. And I think that's quite interesting, is the fact that he was awake when other people weren't makes you wonder, wasn't he generally awake when other people weren't? Wasn't that part of his, is he someone who was often awake at 3, 4, 5 in the morning? Or what, did he not have exams to write, or did he have exams to write? What's the situation? So this is a map that's come out. Kaylee and Maddie at the Corner Club, and that was between those hours. And at the Grub Truck at 318 Main Street, that was at 1:40. That's the final footage we saw of them. And then everyone was back by about 1:45 in the morning. Kaylee and Maddie back at the residence. Ethan and Xana, they attended a different party. over here, just around the corner. And then they were back as well at 1:45. So basically everyone was back home, the way I understand it, at about 1:45 in the morning. And we know the crime happened from about 3, maybe between 3 and 4. So one does wonder, is there going to be much CCTV to track movement, not only between of the victims, but also a possible perpetrator? Is there going to be anything to see here? Is there going to be anything to see on this side? I guess we'll see. We are seeing more and more the importance of CCTV footage in these cases, where it's really surprising how much is out there. We saw it with the Eliza Fletcher case. We saw it with the Kylie Rodney case. We also saw it with the Gabby Petito case. DC says, what time do bars close in that state? Susie says, is a knife more personal? Relatively, yes, it is. I mean, you've got to come in very intimate, face-to-face contact, physical contact with someone. I remember watching something about assassins, and the guy was saying, you start off with a rifle. This is a sniper. You start off with an assassin. You start off with a rifle, which gives you maximum distance with your victim. Then it's a, let's say, a shorter weapon, like a firearm with a silencer. And the final phase for an assassin is a knife, because it's quiet, but it also allows you to come into intimate contact with the victim. But by then you really need, as an assassin within that spiel, you need to really have control over your emotions, control over your environment. You need to know what's kind of going on. Yeah, someone says, was a dog killed? I don't know. As far as I know, there was a dog in this house. So that's a good question. There's still quite a lot of questions. It's still quite early. We're still trying to figure out what happened. So a recently released timeline suggests all 4 were home shortly before 2 a.m. So I think it's reasonable to assume that after arriving home, by around 1 hour later, they would all be in bed asleep, particularly if they arrived home somewhat intoxicated. The fact that the 2 other housemates didn't hear anything also suggests not only that they were sleeping, but that everyone was sleeping. So I believe that they were all sleeping when this happened. Now, according to this article, which quotes Ashley Banfield, basically just repeats that interview. How do you pronounce this? Is it later or lata? Later, I'm going to say later, County Coroner Kathy Mabat, or is it Mabat, gave shocking new details on a Thursday night appearance on Banfield, saying that the killer or killers remain on the loose. I don't think it's killers. I think it's one, because we know that only one knife was used. The autopsy showed one weapon, consistent with one weapon, one large knife. That murder weapon hasn't been recovered. Now, quoting from this article, it was late at night or early in the morning. It seems likely maybe they were sleeping. Now, do you notice that she says maybe? She doesn't know that for sure. It's not like they were all murdered in their beds, like they were all fast asleep, like they were sedated or something. She says it seems likely maybe they were sleeping. That's why I think some of them were in bed by the end of this crime, and some weren't. That's all. The coroner wouldn't say if the 4 victims were found in separate areas. And I think the reason Ashley Banfield asked that was to infer a struggle. If anyone was found in a separate area, that would suggest someone running away. That would suggest a struggle, a confrontation, someone being alerted through the other crimes and then attempting to flee, attempting to fight for their lives, right? Then the coroner also said there were multiple stab wounds on them, and most of them had just one. That was the lethal stab wound. The fatal ones were to the chest area, the upper body area. Yeah, it's a great point from Stephanie. She says, was someone willing to have multiple victims to get one? I think that shows incredible intentionality. That shows incredible determination. The other thing that I think you also seeing as strategy, like it's not someone who goes in there and messes around. Is not trying to torture anyone, is not trying to teach anyone a lesson. It's literally seems like one severe stroke to a vital organ. I'm not saying there was only one. I'm just saying there was at least one stroke that was totally on target, and then maybe one or two others. But you kind of get the idea. All of this was done in very mercenary, kind of butchering, quick succession, right? Very, very heartless. Yeah, that's kind of that is it. Matthew Kennedy says, why all four? Well, I think there was a primary victim, and then I think a scenario of no witnesses. That's also why if you say, if they were all fast asleep and nobody woke up, then why would you need to kill anyone else? If you've got one target, then go in the house, kill that target, and then go out again, right? I do think that question also brings back this idea of, in the psychology of the killer, isn't there this perception that there's this house and it's filled with beautiful women and one guy's staying there and isn't he lucky or something like that? And I like a girl in that house, but she doesn't like me. And or she did like me, but she doesn't like me anymore, or whatever. But I'm on the outside of that house and I want to get on the inside. I'm on the outside of this person who seems cold and stone-like and heartless, or to me, maybe kind and sunny and friendly to others, but to me, not, right? And I want to penetrate that exterior, right? That might be the psychology. I must tell you, and I'm not trying to say, how can I put this? I'm not trying to equate this silly example with what we're dealing with here. I think it's totally different. But I was once sitting in court in a murder trial in Pretoria, and the victim's best friend was sitting a couple of rows in front of me, quite an attractive girl, and someone I'd actually wanted to interview because I was writing a book about the case, and I had actually engaged really infrequently with her, once or twice. Would you be interested in an interview? And she basically just brushed me off, kind of thing. So anyway, I was sitting in trial, and sort of out of nowhere, she seemed to turn to me and with a big smile waved at me, and I thought, wow, did she read one of my books, or is she finally, has she realized I'm one of the good guys or whatever it was, only to realize the guy sitting next to me, who was the guy that she was actually trying to get his attention. And so there was actually a moment where she turned around, had this big smile on her face, and I guess I lit up, and then you saw her expression drop, like, no, not you. And like me being the recipient of that was like, oh, okay, so I get where this is going. Now, if you take that, and obviously as someone in his 30s or whatever, it's not the end of the world, but you can imagine if you go through that as a student, and you've really got your hopes pinned on someone, and you've really been seeing them in class and seeing them interact with other people, that can feel like the end of the world. That can literally feel like kind of social Armageddon, right? But it's a little thing like that. I mean, even though that didn't really mean a lot, it was a victim's friend. Um, it stuck in my mind. I mean, I do remember it many years later. Things like that can affect people, and I wonder whether that's not the case here. Someone was trying to get um, access to a person, access to their world, access to their heart, and was locked out. And then they broke in out of anger and vengeance. And I don't think it's just that. I think there's a much bigger emotional story going on here that we so far don't know about. Hope so, Stephanie. Hope so. So I do think it makes sense. The coroner said all the fatal stabbings were to the chest area, the upper body area. And so I think that is where the killer focused his um, attack, right? This area. So another question is whether the killer used a flashlight to illuminate his way. So I just went on this line of questioning, um, just to deal with it. Was he wearing night goggles? Was he like totally in a military sort of um, apparel? Was he in like a gamer mode? Was his eyes accustomed to the darkness? Or was there a full moon? Now, apparently, the moon phase, I'm not sure if this is really relevant, but the moon phase was waning gibbous, so it looked a little bit like that. 81.12% illuminated, so mostly almost a full moon. And that would have helped him to see even late at night, even with all the lights off. But the bottom line is, and I got a little bit more information on that from this site, Nine Planets. I think the bottom line, though, is that you had these Christmas decorations up, those lights there. Can you guys see that? That to me would have provided far more of the illumination than from the moon. So that over there, and these lights even over there and over there. Does that make sense? One must also wonder what was the exit route out of here, not just which door, but from there, which way. And when I saw this particular image, it made me wonder. So this is from the Daily Mail. It's actually the Daily Mail via Zillow. But if you look at this image, it says here, eyes all round. There are multiple homes, but so far no neighbors have come forward with any information. So that's the other thing, is the neighbors didn't even hear screaming, which again seems to confirm that this crime was executed very efficiently and very quickly. But if you look at this, is the killer going to be going this way or that way, or is he more likely going to be going this way, away from this part of the fabric? I really don't think he went out the front door, because he would be going into the fabric and where cars could be driving by. So I think it's more likely came out of this entrance and then possibly headed around that way. That's what I think is more likely. Then the question is, did they find any footprints in that area? And is that what they're looking for here? They're looking for some sign of footprints or something. Can you see this side of the house is more private, easier to hide behind, or to be invisible if you are approaching in the dark at night. Something else that's maybe worth noting is this is a view from the bedroom window. One of the master bedrooms, I don't know exactly which one, but there's a sliding door here, but it's a floor to ceiling sliding door, and so light could come through here as well to some extent, depending on, I guess, the curtains as well. Was there any Christmas decorations in this room? These are a couple of other crime scene images, or images near the crime scene. Are there any footprints in this sort of area? So something else just to consider is, had it snowed, was the ground quite wet? Could footprints have been left behind? My biggest question is, if there was a lot of blood, did the person step into it, and did he leave shoe prints? And isn't that going to be your best clue? Also, did that person, if they entered from the outside in, did they bring any dirt or leaves or twigs or anything from the outside in? If they'd been hiding in this sort of area, did they bring any of that sort of detritus in with them? Now, that might be difficult to exclude from the detritus the other people brought in coming from the street, but maybe they stepped out of an Uber and then stepped into the house, whereas this person may have stepped out of dirt. So that's definitely perhaps a factor. I think I've got one more image to show you, this one. So can you see, so that's maybe another thing to look at, is weather over that period. Can you see there's snow here? It does suggest that the ground was damp at least. And that can be quite good for leaving behind scent, and also bringing in debris and perhaps leaving behind debris. Moisture can be quite bad, though, for dissolving DNA in terms of the outdoors. Okay, so where are we now? The coroner also said that she thought it was obvious that the killer was pretty angry. That if you stab someone to death, you're probably pretty angry. Okay. So what do you think is the answer to that? What's your opinion on this? Was this about money or sex? What's your opinion? Susan says neither. SW Firefly says, someone says serial killer. I must say, what I see so much in true crime these days, to me, is a symptom of the pretenders who deal with true crime, is a crime's never bad enough, right? So you've got these 4 victims, right? Let me bring that up like that. You've got these 4 victims, and they were massacred, they were killed, they were butchered with a knife, but that's not bad enough. This person's got to be a serial killer, and they've got to now be killing other people. So, do you know what I mean? It's like a situation of, when a crime takes place, it's never bad enough for someone. It's got to be made even worse. So with the Delphi case, also serial killer. It happens in so many cases. Chris Watts, I think, he was supposed to be, what's the word? He was supposed to be, I think, bisexual or homosexual or something. But it happens in almost every case that, let's make it 10 times worse than it actually is. Kylie Rodney case, let's make it about foul play. And that is the part that I always find both fascinating and troubling. To me, true crime is largely about a test of your ability to discern reality with very few facts, especially like now. Who is this person that committed this crime, right? And that in a way also tests your ability in your own life to tell the reality of the people that you see around you. Also, new situations you find yourself in. Maybe if you travel to a foreign country, how do you deal with a limited amount of information when you've got to navigate the subway, whatever it is. But invariably, I find in true crime this tendency to let's try and make it worse than it actually is. Let's sensationalize it. And the reason that this happens is that's what social media, that's the job of social media. It's, here's an already sensational case. Let's take it on and make the maximum amount of money. And how do we do that? By adding to the shock value. So let's make it, was the dog killed? Is one of the roommates guilty? And even if it isn't, let's definitely go through that whole process, etc., etc., etc. In other words, it's not really about trying to figure out reality like a detective should do, like Sherlock Holmes should do. Today's true crime is about shock value. It's not actually about discernment or perception or precision or intelligence. It's all about sensational entertainment. And that's why I find it really sick where you sort of say, it's not enough that these 4 beautiful young people were murdered. Let's turn it into a serial killer. This is the first crime, I think the first murder that happened in Moscow in 7 years. So was the previous murder 7 years ago the other serial killing? Yeah, clicks equals money. I'm going to come back to this whole idea of that. I'm going to come back to that as well. There's something I want to talk about in terms of that. Okay, so let me continue. So was this about money or sex? What did you guys say? Stephanie says emasculation, so sex and rejection. Jody says sexual inability. It could also be kind of like sexual impotency, not that you don't have a libido or that you're literally impotent, but that you're in terms of being a man, you're being shown to be impotent. You're being shown that, sorry, you don't figure on my sort of Richter scale, right? And something that I think is unavoidable when you look at the social media of Madison Mogan and also Kaylee. It's they're pretty girls. They are at that time of their lives where they are arguably the most pretty, the most desirable, all that kind of thing. And so a lot of those feelings, desire, attraction, despair, dejection, all of those things around, where young people decide where they fit in the pecking order. I'm really beautiful, you not. I'm really high up on the status thing, you're not. That's kind of where it's asserted. And on the one hand, you can feel incredibly happy because you find out, wow, I'm incredibly beautiful. But you may also find out, you might end up being incredibly unhappy to find out, perhaps as a man, I'm not particularly desirable, or compared to X, Y, and Z, I'm not. And then that's not a very nice thing. It's very invalidating. And the worst part of it is it may be true. It may be true. Actually, you know what? You're not as amazing as you thought you were. Catherine Wall says it's about power. That's actually a really great answer to that. It's a really great answer. So in my opinion, if you say it's not about money, I don't think that's strictly speaking true, because money is in a way a representation of a kind of power or influence, if you want to put it that way. Although the killer didn't take anything, he did take 4 people's lives. He didn't need to take 4. He could have just taken 1. I think taking 4 lives was in a way about showing a kind of power, right? That he personally gets a sense of payback through killing 4 people, not just not just the one. But I do think primarily it's about sex. Primarily it's about someone who wanted a particular outcome and was denied, and that has revealed his impotency, and he didn't like that. And in a very sick way, the knife represents a kind of forceful phallus, right? In other words, this person in his real life isn't able to use the phallus. I apologize for even this idea, but isn't able to use his sexuality in a natural way. It's unwelcome. It's the doors are locked, the doors are closed, kind of thing. And so what he's literally doing here is he's forcing his way in. The knife is a kind of borrowed strength, a kind of borrowed phallus. It's a very oversized knife as well. And through that, it's almost like this idea that people buy big cars, expensive cars, to make up for something else. I think it's the same kind of thing, but in the context of kind of a young person. Yeah. Penetration, intrusion, breaking through that surface, but also taking back power by force. And also I think it shows he's a coward, because the fact that he does this when the victims are at their most vulnerable. I mean, even compare this to the Delphi killer. That person, as cowardly as he was, because those are very young people, 13, 14-year-olds. That was at least done, in terms of the cowardice argument, that was done in daylight. He allowed them to see him. He allowed there to be I guess, a contest, whereas this person was so cowardly that he came under the cover of night, right? It shows a very low level of confidence, actually. Okay. So another question that you might, so in terms of, was this about money or sex? It's kind of about both. Money being a proxy for power, but ultimately the main driver when you are 20 years old, especially if you're male, is sex. And I do think that is the triggering factor. Sex as a indicator that you don't have any power. So do you think there was do you think that these crimes were slashing crimes or stabbing crimes? It might seem like a gratuitous question. You might say, so what either way? But there is a difference. Stabbing denotes anger, and this sort of idea to penetrate, this idea of being locked out, and I almost trying to hammer home, I'm trying to get in, right? Stabbing denotes anger, and I do think anger, frustration, but frustration that becomes anger, rage is really part of this. There are a lot of crimes where I hear people saying this person had rage, where I don't think that that's really the case. I think there's often frustration and fear, but this is a case that I think denotes rage. It may come from a place of fear as well, like, wow, am I going to be single my whole life? Or why can't I get a girl, or whatever? There's fear around that. But when that fear lasts long enough, it becomes anger. It becomes frustration, which becomes anger. I think slashing, again, we don't know exactly what happened here, but I think slashing denotes the love of violence. You might say that 4 people being killed is a love of violence. I think it's more the level of anger, the level of opprobrium. Okay. Nothing was stolen. There was no essay. That's the other side. So you might say, so how can it be a crime about sex if there wasn't even any essay, right? I think it was about sex and some sort of revenge for a perceived slight, something that seems like a big deal when you're in your 20s, but hardly matters when you've been in a few relationships. I don't want to say right now why I believe this is so. I've said this before, but I believe the order that the victims were killed is, in my opinion. So when you are saying who's the primary victim, you're also saying who's the first victim. So I believe the order of the victims was Madison Mogan, then Kaylee Consalves. I imagine both of them were in bed. So I agree with that. And then Ethan Chapin, I think he was the third victim. And I think he was possibly roused by the commotion. And then finally Xana, who I think did try to confront, flee, or fight off the attacker. I don't think that she was in bed. It's also possible that she was in bed with Ethan. I mean, why not? And if that's the case, and if it was a situation where the killer came into that room and there were actually two people in that room, then he would have prioritized Ethan. And then in that situation, she may have tried to fight him off to protect herself, but also to defend Ethan, right? And so she may have been the last victim and sustained a certain amount of bruises after Ethan was killed, maybe tried to run away and was caught. I don't know. It's difficult to know anything with so little information. But I do think that Xana was one of the last victims, if not the last. Because we know, according to her father, that she had bruises, right? She may also have died on the bed, even if she got out of the bed, because she went back to the bed to attend to Ethan. You must remember, if you die from a stab wound, you don't die in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. It can take quite a long time. It can take a minute. It can take 3, 4, 5 minutes. Right? It's an agonizing death. It's definitely one of the worst ways to die. And I think we need to think about that. You know, we need to, when we see these victims, we need to think they did experience pain. Even if they were asleep, they would have woken up to excruciating pain. And I think that would lead to making a noise. You know, I doubt whether all four of them made zero noise, right? The reason why we're asking these questions is to try and figure out, in terms of how this was done, who we're dealing with. It's not really to be gratuitously gratuitous. It's to try and figure out through these four, what does what we know tell us about what we don't know, right? So if I'm kind of going to start signing off here, if I'd been the authorities and I kind of had a wish list, I would have sealed off the town, done body searches of all the male students, checking for bruises, cuts, or scratches, right? I would have kind of put a crime scene tape around the entire town, and then gone through all of think about what you've just dealt with in terms of the Delphi killer. He was living in plain sight. He was there all along. But the problem with that idea is we're not dealing with the Gestapo. You can't do that. You've got to have probable cause to do that kind of thing. You've got to have probable cause to kind of go up to an average citizen and say, we need to kind of detain you and we need to photograph your body and kind of thing. You need probable cause for that. What if you played football the day before? Those bruises don't necessarily mean anything. What if you don't have an alibi and you played football, but you didn't commit the crime? You know what I mean? That's how easy you can get into a legal quagmire. And so you can't apply social media standards to the protocols of law enforcement. You need probable cause. What was your connection to this person? Why do your shoes have blood on it or whatever? Why were you at that food stall? Okay, so as I say, the cops aren't the Gestapo, and so unfortunately now you've got to search for these clues, and in that time, a lot of clues disappear. For example, bruises would now start disappearing from the perpetrator. If he's got some scratches from nails, or also from bumping into furniture, or even from the knife slipping and him cutting himself with a knife, which often happens. Jodi Arias did that. Then those injuries are going to start healing. And the longer they take to find this guy, the better the chance that some of those original injuries are going to heal. Scott Peterson had small little cuts on his fingers that people thought it was a certain thing. I believe it was actually chicken wire. I believe that he was actually wrapping his wife in chicken wire so that he could attach anchors, and that's how he made those little nicks onto his fingers. But that was picked up by someone interviewing him. By the way, Scott Peterson, his trial, whether he's going to actually be retried, that's going to be decided as soon as December. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Terry said something about rain. Has it rained or snowed since Sunday in Moscow? It's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is, but the photos seem to show it has snowed. When I'm not too sure. Yeah, possibly hand injuries. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to end off by providing a bit of a profile, which is my assessment based on what we do know, based on some intertextuality with other cases that we've dealt with, and then based on true crime rocket science, right? So under this headline, Profiling Evil, I've come up with the following. Now, it's quite easy to get caught up in the trees, the details of this case. You could say, who's the primary victim? That's in a way getting lost in the trees. The fact is there were 4 victims, and they were killed in a particularly brutal way, right? So what does that tell you? So forget about who is the first victim, who's the primary victim. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with 4 victims, all 4 of them stabbed, right? At the same time, right? So who are we dealing with? So we're dealing with someone who is particularly sadistic. It's a sadistic crime, so the person who committed it is particularly sadistic. So that is already giving you quite a big insight without looking at any evidence, really, just saying we've got 4 victims, all of them were stabbed, right? The next thing, a high degree of sadism indicates an ANAL personality. I don't really want to say the word, right? Do you know what that means? Do you know what it means to say that someone is that? So if you think of it literally, it comes from this idea of being, just trying to think, but it comes from this idea where when you're a child, some children, infants, babies, play with their excrement, and they learn that by doing that, they get the attention of their parents. They're able to exert power of their parents by playing with excrement, right? And so obviously this horrifies their parents, but what happens is there's a power struggle that takes place. The little child realizes when he does this that this person becomes incredibly pays attention to them for starters, but also whether it's negative attention or positive, they are able to instantly get a maximal level of response from the parent, right? Now, if you think of this in a symbolic way, excrement is an analogy for death. So by playing with death, you get a maximum power response. You basically from being a helpless infant that can't get anyone's attention, by playing with death, excrement, you can instantly get the power supply that you need by doing that, right? And I believe that is what we're talking about in this case. Someone who has decided that they've realized that they're powerless, which is why they committed this crime. They realized that this is the most authentic moment in their lives, that they've realized, I'm actually not good enough for the situation. I don't have power, and I want power, I need power, and so I'm going to go and get it, right? And it's through this ANAL approach, which is sadistic, right? The flip side to sadism is that you are someone who doesn't deal with life. You don't deal with trying to gain power through the proper protocols, which is increasing your status, having good relationships with people around you, becoming a person worthy of love, right? Instead, you decide, I'm giving up on that process. I'm going to take power by force because I can see that I can't take it any other way. A person like that has become a ANAL personality, which means their focus over a period of time has turned away from life and turned instead to, you can either say excrement or death, right? So what are some examples of things that are not alive that you spend time with? Well, one example could be, for example, gaming, right? Instead of participating with someone who is alive, and I'm not saying every person in the world who's a gamer is that. I'm just saying if you're an extreme gamer, you're doing it far more than average, then that can lead to an ANAL personality. In other words, an antisocial person. Think about Keegan Kline. He was also a gamer within the context of all the other things. Gaming is one aspect. Another one is pornography. Instead of having relationships with real people, you have relationships with photos and images. And that takes you further and further away from those sorts of relationships. Another level to that is drugs or any kind of addiction. So basically you could have all three of those as a kind of addiction. You could be addicted to gaming, addicted to pornography, addicted to drugs, or addicted to all three of those. And ultimately then you are an ANAL personality who's now drifted quite far away from being just a living person. What is a person supposed to do? A person is a social animal. A person is supposed to engage with family, with friends, with someone they're attracted to. They're supposed to be in relationships. And they're especially supposed to be doing that when they are young and beautiful and at the peak of their powers. Their physical powers are at a peak. The attractiveness power, if you want to call it that, is supposed to be at a peak as well. And if you find that you are excluded or for whatever reason your peers don't like you or don't appreciate you, then that kind of invalidates you, and you either fight against that or you try and build yourself up in some way. or you give up on that struggle. And at the time that you're supposed to become a person, you become not a person. You become ANAL. You turn your back on life and you embrace death. So embracing death, this anal sadistic personality, is someone who only games, is addicted to almost everything, and his actual social, the glue that holds him to society is almost not there at all. I think that's the kind of individual that we're looking for here. But there's another aspect as well. I think he's egocentric. The size of that knife suggests to me an egocentric individual who likes to express himself in traditional masculine male ways. I mean, that's true of a lot of young men anyway, right? You might say what you're talking about here is not that different from any young man. There are a lot of young men that are interested in that, and that. But we're saying it's at quite an extreme level. He's more isolated than usual. He's more rejected than usual. He's more addicted than usual. Is more of an outsider than usual. So I do think he's an egocentric individual. He may be failing at his studies, but he likes to express himself in traditional ways. So hunting, watching football, associating himself with perhaps military icons. The fact that they described his knife as a Rambo knife to me immediately, and the whole stealth attack just as like a Rambo aspect to it. And then he may be also associating with certain kind of militant political ideas as well. So that could also be an aspect. In other words, a weak person tries to get a sense of strength through a powerful leader, but where there's sort of overkill from the powerful leader. In other words, someone who's particularly weak is very vulnerable to someone who's making grandstanding promises of power, but they can't actually deliver them. But what it gives you is a sense of power, which is what you want, right? Someone who is strong and independent within themselves doesn't need someone to make promises of power, right? Does that make sense? SB says, I think this analysis is over speculation. The wounds are very few in number. The hyperaggression you're describing would likely result in multiple stab wounds and overkill. You could say that. On the other hand, you could say, even if each victim was stabbed just one time, which I don't think is the case, I don't think it was one very effective stab wound in all four of them. But even if it was just that, 4 people killed when it's very likely that they were only after one person is overkill in and of itself. Even if it was one stab wound, even if you want to imagine that it was someone shooting a gun, 4 bullets, and that's all it was, and I don't think it was, you still have a bloodbath. And what that is talking about is sadism, right? The other thing in terms of your comment that is right is we don't have very much information right now. So what else can you do but speculate, right? And if you someone who doesn't want to speculate, then you should not be on a true crime channel. In other words, if you feel like let's wait till we get the evidence, then stay off YouTube. If you feel like someone that wants to wait till the killer's found, stay off YouTube. Also, don't watch the news. If you want to wait for the evidence, well, then wait for someone to be charged. But then stay away. Don't come to a true crime channel and say, please stop thinking about it. Because there are some people who actually care about the truth and about justice and about what really happened here. And there's some who care about that more than others, and some who know how to deal with that better than others. Yeah, so we don't know whether there was someone in the fabric that, like in the case of Jodi Arias, she was identified immediately. So when people mention this thing about the S word, someone kind of creeping around, I think that would have come out a long time ago if that was true, meaning if there was an obvious what, then I think it would be obvious. Maybe you could say it is obvious because a week later it is coming out. So I suppose that's an argument. But you would imagine if there was a clear suspect, that name would have been out there a long time ago. Dan Barron says, why didn't he burn down the house? Wow, so Koi Cat says Jodi Arias happened 6 miles from me. So are you in Mesa, Arizona? Jody says, I've heard that they were I don't know if that's a fact, but I mean the chest tends to be where the heart is. Let me just have a look. Where did you hear that about the carotid artery? Yeah, like the carotid artery is in the neck. So I don't think that is. I don't think that is accurate. Wherever you heard that. Where did you hear that they were stabbed in the carotid artery? Because that's in that area, and what the coroner said was that they were stabbed in the chest. I don't know if I agree with that, because you've got there's quite a lot of bone in this area. You've got a chest plate over here. It's possible, but you could also be stabbed right under that into the lungs, just under the rib cage. That could also create serious problems. So the coroner said the chest. You must be careful listening to speculation from YouTube channels and then passing it on as fact. It's you need to just be careful. So let's play a little bit more from this interview. Let's go kind of back to what she says. Let me put this on.
Were they found in separate areas of the house?
That hasn't been disclosed yet.
Can you tell me, when you say that they might have been sleeping, were they found in beds?
Yes.
And so can you tell me if there were multiple stab wounds per victim, or were these sort of, individual lethal stab wounds that may have been less in number, but more in lethality?
There were multiple stab wounds, yes, on them. So, and
were there? Go ahead.
And most of them had just like one that was the lethal stab wound. Yes.
Can you describe what that one might have been?
But they were to the fatal ones were to the chest area or the upper body area.
So I understand why the coroner's responses are so halting, right? Because there are legal consequences to what she says. She can't reveal too much. She can't provide too much detail. So she's trying to hold on to like a mental thread in her mind. And so if it seems like she's inarticulate, or it seems like she's unsure, it's not that, it's that she's actually trying to keep between that, sort of walk that fine line of give information and not give information, because she knows more than what she's saying. So she's trying to give the amount of information that is acceptable and appropriate, and not give information that she does know that would be inappropriate because it could jeopardize an investigation and could also, to some extent, traumatize certain people. They've decided how much they should know. So when there's a certain point where she says something like there was one stab wound, and then at another point multiple stab wounds, what that means is there was one main wound that killed that person, right? There's one major wound that killed that person, but then there were also multiple stab wounds. So I would imagine that every single victim had more than one stab wound. So if each victim had 2 wounds, that's a total of 8 stab wounds. If each victim had 3 stab wounds, that's 12. That's 12 stabbing motions. I wouldn't be surprised if the average is something like 3 to 4 stab motions per victim, which is somewhere between 12 and 16. Could even be more than that. But I would think almost an average of 3 to 4 stab wounds per victim. Right. So if you have this idea that each one was sort of just stabbed once in some kind of military precision thing, I don't think that's accurate. And it's also not the other thing where, because there just wouldn't have been time for it, where one victim was totally right. I don't think that's the case either. So you've got to try and, I don't want to say read between the lines with what the coroner is saying, but you've got to try and think in a reasonable way with what's that about, what she's trying to get at. Terry Dean says, fatal wound first or after the other wounds? I think that may vary. I think if the person is lying motionless, right, then certainly your very first victim, you could get the initial blow on target, the initial stab wound on target. But if someone is lying kind of crouched up, you might not get the ideal, you know what I mean? It might require, several thrusts to actually get to the target area in terms of the chest. I mean, think about when people sleep. Do they lie on their backs? Do they lie on their stomachs? Do they lie on their sides? And how would that vary across 4 different victims? Yeah, I mean, that is true. I can't believe one person could do this. Yeah. With a knife like that, the size of that knife means if a lot of the knife penetrates the chest, there's going to be a heck of a lot of bleeding anywhere in the chest area, especially if there's more than one stab wound. So SB, when you say that, who's there is saying, it really always irritates me when you hear they say. What's your source for that? Is it a news source? Is it social media? Is it Reddit? What's your source for that? Okay, so I think I'm going to end off here. It's a fairly short live. I just want to look at the latest news, see what's current right now. So this is quite something. Have a look at this. This is from Fox News. Idaho murder victim's sister says she called a man 7 times the night of the slayings. Kaylee's sister said her 6th and last phone call to a man named Jack was made at 2:52 a.m. Yeah, so that brings up this particular article. And again, we must be really careful. Like we want to gather information without kind of saying you the murderer. We want to look at information in a kind of a dispassionate way. Remember, these are young people's lives, and see what is likely without jumping to conclusions and starting a witch hunt, right? So in terms of this, and I'm kind of quite scared to even bring this up, quite uncomfortable even bringing this up, but it is in the media. This is Jack, and this is on her social media. This is the boyfriend of Kaylee Consalves, right? And I'm not going to show his face again. I just wanted to show you a quick glimpse of that. But he's someone that has been mentioned. And so you see in this article that apparently Kaylee called Jack, I think, 6 times on the night of the slayings. So does that mean anything? Now, it could mean nothing. We know that Kylie called her ex-boyfriend the night that she died. Was that relevant? Not really. It could be relevant. We don't know at this point until we know more about the dynamics. But it does seem quite a lot. 7 times. What was that about? Also, why? I mean, I had this question anyway, was if they were together, if they're in a relationship, why are they not spending the night together? Like, why isn't Jack with them at that food stall? And the answer might be, well, he was. He was at the bar. I'm just see if I can bring that image up again of the map. He may have been part of the partying earlier, right? But that is a question that kind of, I think, needs to be answered, is where Kaylee and Maddie were at the corner club. Was Jack at the corner club? If Jack wasn't at the corner club, why wasn't he at the corner club? So that's a dynamic that I think we need to figure out. Leslie says Jack was cleared tonight by the Moscow police. What is your source for that? If that's true, that's great news, because we do want to do that. But we do kind of need to know where we're getting our information. It does say in this, at the bottom of this image, that Jack is not thought to have been in the home. So let's just make that quite clear. Just want to see if I can find that particular story. Yeah, so this is exactly what you'd expect. Is it looks like he is being targeted. He's talking about his world has been turned upside down. So this is another, the only reason I'm sharing this with you guys is already in the mainstream media. It says her boyfriend is bereft. They were like peanut butter and jelly. He was dating Madison Mogan. So if you look at that other image, doesn't it say that he was dating Kaylee? So there's already some difference in accuracy. As far as I know, it's not Kaylee. It's actually Madison Mogan, who had this guy as a boyfriend. Do you guys have it as that? but for like a guy like him, I would suggest do not give any interviews to YouTubers. They will tear you apart. I would really that would be my advice. So here's an article in the New York Post. World turned upside down, says mom of victim's boyfriend. I just want to see what else I can tell you here. Yeah, so this is definitely quite interesting. This is from the New York Post. We were expecting her for Thanksgiving. The slain co-ed was like part of the family. Whenever we talked on the phone, she always said, "I love you." Now you can imagine that. I don't know. Like you could have another guy that we don't know who it is. Thought he was going to be spending Thanksgiving with someone. Maybe he was led to believe that that was going to happen, but then it didn't happen. Also, was Maddie having second thoughts? Was she going to, I don't know, she didn't want to spend it with a particular person, or she wanted to be alone? Was that what those calls were about? Like, was there some disagreement that led to someone changing their mind? You know what? I don't actually want to do Thanksgiving with you after all, right? Dan Barron says, still, why all four? I think the answer to that is always going to be because of emotions. Someone is very emotional. You could also have a situation where someone wants to be in a relationship, but they live in a house together. And then the others talk about what's going on and they say, well, look, I'm going to support you. And again, I think you've got to look at that final Instagram post where someone says, it's so great to have all these people around me. I'm so happy. While the person who's not in that picture is looking at that and feeling very excluded. He's not part of that happy picture. He obviously wants to be. Maybe he feels like it's a message to him. It probably isn't, but maybe he feels like it is. So I think what you can see is, and it's unfortunate that it goes like this, is obviously this is a case where you don't say, is there foul play? There's obviously foul play, but you have to start looking at people and their relationships and excluding them. So either you've got an alibi or you don't. And so you want to exclude them. And this is where it gets so dangerous with social media, because what social media wants to do is include people and turn everyone into a suspect and they want to rush to judgment. And we've got to be careful not to do that. Okay, so let's have a look again at the stats over here. So it's very close between Kaylee and Maddie, 32% Kaylee, 31% Madison. I tend to basically agree with how you guys have voted. I tend to agree with that. What does Stephanie say? So where is the suspect? That's a good question. Yeah, it's hard to say. I would imagine that he would have wanted to stay there, right? But if classes have ended, maybe he's not there anymore. It's difficult to say. Look at the Delphi case. Did that killer leave town? Looks like he didn't, but then another individual did leave town. Keegan Klein, he did leave town. So I think the best way to answer that is I don't know. I guess it depends where home is, and also what home is. What's home like? I think we are talking about an unstable, fragile ego, and there are often a lot of potentially fragile egos at that age. Moon Shadow says, has anyone thought about the food truck guy? Well, we dealt with that in the first analysis. Yeah, it does seem like everyone's going to pay. Yeah. If this individual is a loner type of person, then I wouldn't imagine that he's gone home, because you kind of get the idea that he's used to being alone. And the trauma of this isn't that traumatic to him. So, yeah. But it's very hard without knowing more about who we're talking about to say that. I would almost imagine that he wouldn't have left. But if there are no classes, then maybe he has. I don't know. Yeah, Candy says the killer could be the Uber driver. Yeah, it's kind of a situation where everyone is a suspect, but I tend to think that this is not anybody's a suspect. I think there's a personal link, just as there was with Libby and the perpetrator there. This is not a random attack. It's a targeted attack. So there's something linking the perpetrator in the story. Brits Creek says, wasn't the Uber driver cleared? You would think so, otherwise you'd be hearing about it. Let's see if we can find anything on that. It's actually not, that's something else. Okay, so it's not Lyft. Yeah, I've just got the question here about the Uber driver. It doesn't say anything about cleared. Yeah, so we'll see. So here's another photo from the New York Post. It's quite a touching image, quite a detailed image as well. If you think about, that's also from the New York Post, if you think about Caitlin Armstrong, what did she do? She kind of wanted to be alone, but also with people. She didn't want to be in another relationship, but she also kind of wanted to be with people at a certain point. That's Caitlin Armstrong. So someone here says, Tet Weiler said she and her boyfriend Dakota Spark saw nothing out of the ordinary. For us, it was a shock. I didn't go to bed until 2 or 3 and I didn't hear anything. This is from this article. All was quiet when he left the house at 11:45. I think they went to the same party just around the corner. So that's from this article. Neighbors told the Post on Thursday the 6 people who shared the house were quieter than their rowdy collegiate neighbors. A group of students would have small parties, but they were usually quiet by 10 p.m. They would sit on the patio around a fire, drink beer, and listen to music. She said she sometimes saw small groups of people in the kitchen. Okay. So the last thing I want to say is that my original, the way that I was going to present this episode was I was going to make a cup of coffee. This arrived today in the mail. And, it's obviously a merch item, right? And I was going to make a cup of coffee, and I was going to sort of drink the cup of coffee while I was presenting this. And between that and sort of making dinner and preparing the script for this episode, I just thought that it was totally inappropriate. I thought, cheapest, I don't want to be trying to sell. I don't want to be, and I'm just showing you this I'm not trying to sell it right now. I don't want to, what's the word? I don't want to hawk items in the middle of talking about a quadruple murder investigation, right? It's like the epitome of trying to make money out of blood. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So, and the reason that I've ordered some of my own merch items is I see all these YouTubers doing the same thing. You must have the cap, you must have the T-shirt, you must have the mug, whatever. But I couldn't help thinking, although maybe you can do that, maybe you can have your coffee cup or whatever. I'm definitely not going to do that in this now, in this sort of thing. Like maybe down the line when you are on day whatever, week 20 or whatever it is, further down the line and trying to figure out some evidence or dealing with a cold case. But literally at this stage, doing that, oh, by the way, buy my merch. All I'm saying is I'm quite new to that. Like I don't really have even the cap yet. I've ordered it. And I'm sort of looking at what other YouTubers are doing, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe you need to be more business-like in your approach. But then I find when you actually do that, it feels really, really mercenary. And I think I would be a psychopath to do that sort of thing. Like in a case like this, in the middle of the case, to say, oh, by the way, do you want to order your merch? As a link to that. This should be about them, right? This should be about them and the fact that they suffered and what happened and the reality of what happened to them. That should be the focus. Do you guys agree with that? They need to be the focus of this. Yeah, it's very distasteful. Stephanie, I will show you on Patreon. Yeah, it's this mug, but I mean, I'm not even going to show it now because it's the point that I'm trying to make is that now's not the time to do that kind of thing, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. The point is that I was going to make a cup of coffee, right? And I was going to show you guys something that happened to arrive this today. I mean, it arrived today. That's why I wanted to show it today. But then I thought it's totally inappropriate to what the focus needs to be, right? In the context of that. So now we're going to talk about this, and there's interest in this case, but by the way, buy my merch item, right? Yes, buy my merch item, but in a totally different context. Let's deal with this case for now. And it just made me think that all these other true crime channels covering these things when it's this merch, this merch, I don't know. Where you dressed head to toe in your own merch and you've got the coffee cup. maybe you need to put that aside and expend more energy on the victims. Not you, we, all of us. Maybe we need to become people again. And I'm not going to mention that channel's name, but there's a channel out there that is all merch. Wherever you see it, it's caps and shirts and whatever. And it's basically vultures pulling out dead bodies, but buy my merch. I don't know. We must remember our humanity. Not become like these horrible people that commit these crimes. Not become heartless. Thanks a lot. Brits Creek says, I don't need more crap. Keep the merch. Here's a donation. Thanks for that. Let's see what you guys are saying. Okay, thanks a lot for that. So I must say, when I look at this whole idea of someone who's sadistic, and as I said, ANAL, and then you look at a picture of a guy who may or may not be part of this, then it's hard to reconcile the two. Can't it just be any ordinary guy who gets really emotional? And I've got to sort of play with that in my mind. Like, couldn't you just say that a young person is capable of being extremely anal sadistic anyway? Like, not that they've got to be doing a lot of gaming or whatever. But I think what this does talk about is someone wanted access to the fairy tale, to the life, the love, the softness, the sweetness, the joy of being ensconced in something that feels wonderful, right? And that feeling of utter cruelty when you sort of realize I'm not part of that. I want so badly to be part of that. I want so badly to be part of this fairy tale. I'm so close to it. I can almost touch it, kind of thing, but I'm not. And if I'm not, then no one can be. Like, if I can't have my fairy tale, no one can have it. That kind of does feel quite incel-like. If someone who's had quite a few girlfriends and had love affairs or whatever, and then someone rejects you, well, they've dealt with it. But someone who's never had that, it does feel like the end of the world. Isn't that the kind of person we're dealing with here? Yeah, it's no murder suicide. That's right. Thanks a lot, Woobles. Wooble says love to all of you. Thanks for that. Dan Barron says, is he sleeping well tonight? I don't think so. I think there's introspection going on, and probably already regret, because that emotion has passed by. And now it's the cowardly thing of, I don't want to get caught, and I want my life just to carry on. Let's just go back to how it was. Of course, those emotions have passed on, not all of them, but the maximum tsunami is broken. But of course, now all of these people are still dead and the investigation continues. And then what happens then is, I just want everything to go back to normal. Well, it's never going to go back to normal. Normal, that's permanently over. Sativa says, I'm late. You are so late because I'm about out of here. Could they be going about a normal life right now? Yeah, I think what the emphasis now is to pretend that I'm not really emotional about this. To pretend that everything is normal. So if it would be normal to stay where they are, then they would stay where they are. If it would be normal to go home, maybe they'd go home. If going home meant that someone would be asking questions, probably they wouldn't go home. If going home meant someone might find the knife, maybe they wouldn't go home. Yeah. Bonnie says that's a subtle distinction. What do you mean, Bonnie? Peyton says, will he do it again? I don't think so. I think this is a once in a lifetime crime. I think it's particular to a particular individual. I think if everyone in that house were killed, then I think you could say someone else could happen. Also, if it was just Madison and Kaylee, I think you could also then say maybe you're going to see something like that again. Or if just two people in one house and two people in another house, but I don't see there being another crime. I do think it's dangerous. It's dangerous that he's still out there. Yeah, Susie, I'm not going to repeat what you're saying there because that's rumor. Like, who told you that? Allegedly. I think that's also totally speculative, Blitzkrieg. Yvonne says, so tragic that it comes down to death if one doesn't get what they want. Do I think he's done this before? No, but I do think that. So that's actually quite a good question. I think he's done other things where there's shedding of blood, such as hunting or something like that. I don't think it's the first time he's killed something. So I don't think he's killed another person, but I think he may have killed animals, or even in terms of a gaming scenario, something like that. Because this was particularly violent. I don't think you go from 0 to this level of violence just like that. There's sadism that's in this person's life already. Yeah, there may be a military connection, might have a military father or brother, or some other military, there may be some military connection. Kathy says, I'm emotional, but I haven't even hit anyone ever. But Kathy, you're a woman. Men are designed in a way differently. Men, when they get emotional, they want to do something. So they don't want to just talk. They want to, in a way, show their power. Or if they don't want to show their power, then they may want to just leave, kind of thing. But women are totally different. When women are emotional, they maybe want to talk or cry or something. Men want to do something. That's why when a woman is emotional and they talk to their partners and they just want them to talk back, the male often feels like, if it's in a heterosexual relationship, they often feel like, yeah, but I want to do something. I want to solve it. What can I do to make this better? No, don't do anything. Just listen, right? Sherry Parr says, what do you think he did with a knife? What do I think he did with a knife? The question is, would he have disposed of it or would he have kept it? I think number one, he would have washed it. And then he may have either buried it or, I doubt whether he would still have it with him, because that would be very inculpatory. But you never know. In the Caitlin Armstrong case, a gun was, I think, found. Actually, I don't know this for sure. As far as I know, the gun was found in the home. Maybe it was found in the car, but the gun, I think, was found. Put it that way. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I do think, at the very least, the knife was washed. In the Amanda Knox case, what they thought was the knife. I think there was two possible murder weapons. They thought they actually found a murder weapon. So it's not necessarily that it would be thrown away. It's difficult to answer that. The problem with throwing something away or burying it is it can then be found. So keep also, if you have a certain kind of knife and you throw it away, and someone says, "Where's that knife that you had?" That's also a problem. You know, so what? I've got a knife just like the murder weapon. You're damned if you keep it. You're damned if you don't. If you do throw it away, it could be found. Who's to say someone else wasn't on their phones calling someone? Okay. Yeah, Jodi Arias stabbed a man multiple times. What happened to the knife in the Jodi Arias case? Okay, I think I'm gonna. When was the garbage dumpsters picked up? The next day. Okay. Would there be sentimental value? Yeah, there could be. There could be. I don't know how expensive those knives are, but I mean that could definitely have some sort of value. In the O.J. Simpson case, what happened to the knife in that case? Maharaja Vuljamar says, "Do you think they have evidence they are not sharing?" Yes, I do think there are shoe prints. I think it would be very hard for there not to be shoe prints. There's another case that this reminds me of. Let me see if I can bring it up. It happened in New Zealand. And yeah, no, it's not that one. It's David Bain. Anyone heard of David Bain? This case reminds me a little bit of that. This case definitely reminds me a little bit of that. So let me see if I can tell you a little bit about that case. On the morning of the 20th of June, 1994, David Bain called 111 emergency. That was at 7:09, and he said, "They're all dead, they're all dead." When the police arrived, they found 5 members of the Bain family dead. All of them had suffered gunshot wounds. Robin, his father, his wife, Margaret, 50, their daughters are Arawa and Laniette, and Stephen, their son Stephen. So there were five victims, and all of them were shot. And what they noticed in that particular case was that David had socks on, and the socks had different blood in the socks, and there were sock prints all over as well. Anyway, long story short, David was initially found guilty and then later on acquitted. But there's a similarity in this case, is that you have the idea of someone running around the house, but this is with a gun, shooting multiple victims, and what evidence was left behind. So if you're interested in that case, What does Stephanie say? Didn't he call from the house? Yes, he did. But there you have a scenario of a killer going from victim to victim, and it also happened in the morning. There were also some deaths in bed, and then also a struggle. The struggle was with the youngest brother. So the first victim in that case, I think, was the father. The last victim, I think, was the youngest son. And there was a struggle with him. So there's a lot of intertextuality, I think, with this and with that. And that's why I do think you're going to see shoe prints. It's actually quite weird how little information is on that wiki page. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. Let's just do one more search on this thing, see if there's any breaking news. I don't think this is news, but let's put it out there anyway. Idaho College murders, 2 surviving roommates not believed to be involved. I must just stress again that if you're watching this, if you're a student at Idaho, you need to spread the word. They shouldn't engage with social media. I'm talking about those surviving roommates. If you're not sure why, look at the comments in chat here. YouTube are going to turn everyone into a suspect, right? They've done it before, they'll do it again. So in terms, especially with young people, these roommates don't do interviews with YouTube, and boyfriends and ex-boyfriends, same thing. Don't do any interviews with YouTube. Speak to the police. You can speak to the mainstream media and speak to family and that sort of thing. Do not accept, don't even chat, don't even respond to comments on your social media, because that'll be screen grabbed and put onto YouTube. We've seen it before. Lives get ruined this way. You guys are young people. Don't engage. Set all your social media to private. There are people out there that are already going to be going through your social media, screen grabbing and all that, violating your privacy. So really, be aware that social media right now is, especially YouTube, is going to be recklessly pursuing this case, and protect your privacy. Protect your privacy. So I would say that, especially for these 2 roommates, get off social media, set it to private. All your friends, tell them the same thing. Once it's out there, you can't take it down, and they're going to be looking for little red flags in everything you say or you don't say, right? Let's see if there's anything else that's come up. I see People magazine, or People, have at least corrected the spelling back to coroner. Timeline of what we know, what we know about. Okay, there's that. University of Idaho students were likely asleep. That's a very recent headline from CNN. So, where we are right now is we kind of have a manhunt. I think we really have a manhunt right now, unofficially. And I think the manhunt is for a single white male who's probably low 20s. I think he's likely to be a student. Yeah. But there's a quadruple murderer out there that has shown terrifying violence. what else is here? Police can't say if survivors are witnesses or suspects. That's quite strange. So that's obviously been updated. Here they say police can't say if survivors are witnesses or suspects, and then more recently they have been cleared, looks like. Where's that article? Not believed to be involved. So one does wonder, where are law enforcement now? Do they have a person of interest yet? Who are they talking to? One does wonder, what is the suspect? To me, I don't think it's a woman. I don't think it's a female or a woman. I don't think it's an outsider. I do think it's a student. Although there's a possibility it could be that random person that they saw with a knife who's dressed in all black. It could be that person. But if it was that person, surely police have spoken to him because they know who it is. So has that person been excluded? Anne says, in my opinion, the killer was known to them, so they didn't react. I don't think that's the case. I think they didn't know he was even there. That's why they didn't react. It wasn't a known scenario in that sense.
How to take a
I'm not going to repeat what someone is saying. It's a YouTuber who's saying that. So that is the beginning of the sensational thing that's going on. I don't believe that, but what tends to happen is that kind of shocking statement gets a heck of a lot of traction, and you go there basically to find out, I don't know, is it true or isn't it true? Usually it isn't true. Thanks a lot for the money, buy my merch, and then let's go on to the next thing. So I don't know where that comes from, must say. Kathy says the suspect knew the code, I heard, to get in. Where did you hear that? Because he could have gotten in through the sliding door. Where did you hear that he knew that? Can you guys, can we kind of make it a protocol that when you say I heard, you say that's where I heard it from, right? Not they say whatever. You say it, provide the link, provide the source. Otherwise, you can just say anything. They say that, you know what I mean? It really doesn't mean anything. Thanks a lot, Susie. Okay. I don't tend to think of it like that, Bonnie. Crimes come out of society, criminals come out of society, and people aren't criminals until they commit a crime, by definition. And we tend to, once a crime is committed, we want to label them and give them mental illnesses. I don't think this person's mentally ill, as sick and sadistic as this crime is. I don't think they're paranoid or whatever, but I do think there's a high level of sadism, but there's also a high level of sadism all over. So a YouTuber selling his merch or telling lies to make money out of a sensational crime, is also a sadist. He's taking pleasure, he's deriving benefit out of lying to you, and he's enjoying it, right? His work apparatus is excrement, is peddling shit, right? That's another kind of sadism, who doesn't really care about the facts. He cares about making money out of someone else's blood, right? So don't think that criminals are just someone out there with a knife who kills someone. There's criminal psychology all around us. Some of it is somewhat benign, being mischievous, being opportunistic, being greedy, making slurs about other people that aren't really true or whatever. And then it goes to that other point where it's really criminal, where you hurt people. But a lot of that criminal psychology washes over into people that you know, in better or worse situations, right? I think the most popular YouTubers also reflect society, reflect what society wants, reflects what society is in the true crime community. I think that's also something to think about. I do think jealousy is a part of this. I think it's a big part of this. Jealousy is so much worse when you feel impotent, when you've kind of realized, look, it looks like I'm not going to make the cut, that this person doesn't think I'm good enough, but that person is good enough, or whatever, or those people are good enough. Those people are good enough for her, I'm not. Or I was good enough, but now I'm not anymore. Someone says that's not true. What's not true? Bonnie says, I'm a mental health therapist. Okay, so you see probably everyone in terms of a particular. Let me ask this question, Bonnie. Do you see everyone through a particular label, especially criminals, narcissist, what do you call it, psychopath, sociopath, this disorder, that disorder? Well, then that is how you're going to see everyone. I try and see these people as people. I try and see the victims as people, and the perpetrators as people, and that some mechanism connects these people to somebody else. In other words, the disorder didn't commit the crime, the person did. Wouldn't return to the scene of the crime, not in the way that I think you're thinking about. Might walk by, might probably live nearby. Yeah, there are differences between psychopaths and sociopaths. Just Jab says there was a post made from a survivor. Okay, that's interesting. Where's that post? Have you got a link to it? So this is kind of a breaking story. There's news coming out constantly. That's why you've got to, in a way, stay curious. You don't want to too quickly decide what you think you know, because that starts closing doors. So in a way, you want to, even on this idea that it's a student, maybe it's not. Even on the idea that it's someone who's related to them quite closely, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a student that was looking on at this house and felt that it's immoral. It's immoral for men and women to be living together, or in a general incel type sense, just felt like, wow, they're so happy and I'm not. It could be something like that. It just doesn't feel like that level of violence and personal violence would be likely if there wasn't some sort of personal connection. Does that make sense? Yeah, that is such a good, that's a very, very astute statement. Most dangerous time of a relationship is when it's ending. And if you think about the time of year where we are, it's coming to the end of their college life. I think that the two girls, both 21 years old, were about to finalize the exams, and then they would, I think one of them was going to be moving to Texas. So that does spell the end of either the university relationship or um, the particular status quo that existed before that, before they were going to sort of move on. Bonnie says there are many subtleties in mental illness. I think you can, if you want to, you can say every single crime is mental illness, and you can say every single um, event where many people are shot is mental illness. So in other words, you can literally say, you could kind of say the reason why everything happens that is not good is because of mental illness. You could say that. But what are you then actually saying? I mean, what does that mean? It's a little bit like saying a human being murdered four human beings. Yeah, we do know that. It's kind of obvious. Um, if you want to say it's because of mental illness that they committed the crime, what is it that actually telling you? It's a little bit like saying it was committed at night. Yeah, we know that. Someone wasn't in the right state of mind, obviously, when they did this. Yes, obviously. Why? Why weren't they? So you might say, no. I just want to say that the disorder that they have is whatever, schizophrenia. Maybe you want to say that. I don't want to say that. I want to say the person who did that is this person. This is who they are. This is their name. This is their age. These are their connections. These are the dynamics. That's the conversation I want to have. I don't want to have the conversation of this person had schizophrenia, so now we know who it was. I don't really want to have that conversation. The reason this happened is that label, the end. It's like, what is this person's connection to society? How do they feel included or excluded? How are they part of this group of students that were very happy, and how were they apart from them? How does that play into what happened here? And if you would rather have the conversation where you say this person had autism or something, then have that conversation. I'm just not a channel that does that, that says it's because of that disorder that this crime happened. That's another conversation for another channel. My channel is about who's this person really, what's their identity. If you don't like that, you might say, no, I want to go to a channel that talks about those disorders. Do you have a particular disorder? Do you have a particular, like, I don't know, mental illness or whatever? Is that who you are? Like, is who you are, whatever it is, some other label? It's reductionist and simplistic, and it does separate criminals from you, but in reality, it doesn't really, because we're all capable of being criminals. The darkness within us all, yeah. Bonnie says, I'm just saying that when it comes to why someone would do this, it is possible, it is irrational. Yeah, but it's also possible that it's rational. I'm not saying criminal psychology is rational. It's by definition illegal, so it's not sensible. But in terms of criminal psychology, it's totally rational. So if you look at Jeffrey Dahmer, you might say to an outsider, none of that makes any sense. Why not just have a relationship with these people? Why are you eating that person? But if you know the psychology, if you know who he is, if you know where he came from, if you know how lonely he was, then in terms of that psychology, it's not irrational at all. It's the way he addresses power imbalance in his life. To everybody else, it's totally irrational, but to him, it's totally rational. It's totally inevitable. Yeah, it's rational for him, and that's what we're trying to figure out. When we do this, we're trying to find out what he's thinking. We're not trying to say it's right or wrong, or whatever. We're just trying to figure out how is he thinking about this. Yeah, they believe their irrational thoughts. That's why it's so important that we don't do the same thing, even if we're not criminals. Know the facts, be curious, get information, figure out reality, and don't be irrational in your own life because it could get you into trouble. Okay. Yeah, so what is true with that is, like I say, if someone is addicted, then they are quite delusional. They may be so much caught up in gaming or drugs or fantasies of whatever kind that they are very delusional. But there's a reason why that's happening is because they're feeding that, and there's a rational process behind that. That's all. Anyway, I thought I was going to end more than an hour ago. Shelly Babe says, I just subscribed because she's the first one to point out important facts. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, I think on that note, I'm going to skedaddle. I do want to encourage you guys, if you go into other channels, which I'm sure you will do, it's not good to red flag people without any without any evidence. And I also think people have got to be careful putting faces out there willy-nilly. You know, it's innocent till proven guilty. Be careful putting out faces of people that may not have done anything. And so people who start doing that, just address that. There are only about 470 of you guys in chat, but you're enough people, if you go somewhere else, to say, jeepers, we also need to think about the survivors here, not re-traumatize them, not re-target them, not put the knives of social media into innocent victims, right? And I can tell you, if any females are being accused of this crime, it's likely that is taking place. Because I really don't think it's a female that did this. And so in a sense, you guys kind of have the responsibility to keep others that are covering this honest and appropriate. And I hope you will do that. Okay, so my voice is going. Thanks a lot for being here. Take care, Terry Dean. I actually need to chat to you. I believe there's a big storm going on in New York, record breaking. I want to chat to you a little bit about that. Is Stephanie still here? I don't see her in chat for a while. But Yvonne, thanks a lot for that. Yeah, everyone who's in the States, I think it's sort of coming up to your bedtimes, respectively. I hope you have a good sleep. Zircon says, when will you be back? Maybe this time tomorrow, depending on if there's any new news, we'll see. Catherine says, thank you so much for this tonight. You have enlightened me as well. Cool. Okay, so I just want to thank you guys for being here. Take care. Remember to keep YouTube honest, and I'll see you guys next time.